This video is part 2 of creating paste papers for collage making. In this video, I'll show you 8 more paste paper designs that are even better than the 7 I showed you in last week's demo. Hello, my name is Catherine Rains. I'm a mixed media collage artist, and welcome to Tune In Tuesday, where I share weekly art demos to expand your mixed media toolbox. If you see value in this video, I would deeply appreciate a thumbs up, and if you would subscribe to my channel. Links for all the supplies to make these papers are down below, and while you're there, check out my free 5-day class, Collage Kickstart, where I show you how to use all the papers made during Tune In Tuesday to make fabulous collages the very first try. So let's get into creating collage papers with paste. So what we're going to be doing today is expanding on the art demo last week on paste papers. So I gave 7 paste papers last week. I am going to do 8 more, and this is what they're going to look like. So first, materials. For the most part, I am just using a 50-pound drawing paper, nothing special, but you can use almost any paper. You can use copy paper, mixed media paper. I tend to use thinner papers just because I'm going to be tearing these up and pasting them to collages. But I know a lot of artists that use very heavy papers, and that works really beautifully as well. You need some kind of paste. Now, this is the paste I'm using. In the description for this demo, it'll have all links to everything I'm using. You do not need to use this though. This is wallpaper paste. It works incredibly well, but this is not necessary. You can also make your own. You can make it with cornstarch, pastry flour, or cake flour. There are recipes on the internet. Just Google paste paper recipes and you'll find them. This is just incredibly easy, and it's actually very cheap if you can find it. People told me last week they couldn't find it. So making it your own may be the only option. So for those of you who took Kickstart, all the mark makers that you accumulated, jar tops, these are really useful for this. And you need some kind of small jars. So I just got little plastic jars. You can get them from a lot of different places. Again, I have links for all these things. I'm using acrylic paint. This is actually the paint I use. I only use 3 colors. You don't need to use my colors at all. This is just what I use. So I'm using Phthalo Blue green shade. I also use Hansiel Light. I just put them in condiment bottles to make it easier. And I also use a black and white and a quin magenta. So I use 3 primaries. And you need a water bucket and some sponges. So those are the basic supplies. Now, not a big deal. Now, I've already mixed up my paints. These are actually from last week. And as I was setting up, I realized that I didn't have much of this one color. This is actually the color I mixed with you last week. So I thought I would just mix a little more. So for those of you who weren't with me last week, you can see how this is done. So you can see the paste, it's kind of like, I don't know, kind of runny. Doesn't have a lot of depth to it, but it's very easy just to kind of what do you call that, scoop up and put it in here. There is no recipe for this. It's kind of like eyeballing it. This will not actually color the paint as I put in here. So this is like a dark blue. So I'm going to put my Phthalo Blue in here. And honestly, it doesn't matter how much paint I put in here. It's really, the more paint I put in, the thicker the consistency will be in terms of what it will look like when I put it down on paper. So that is more blue than I want. I had a really dark blue, so I'm just going to add a little black to that. Now I'm getting the color I want. So it's a very dark, yummy dark blue. Okay, so that's as hard as it gets. Now, these paints, just going to take my lids off here. These paints stay wet for a very long time. So I could work for a couple hours, and these paints would look just like this. In fact, my brushes, I have a flat brush for every one of these paints. They would all stay good to go. So I don't need to, keep covering these or keep putting my paint brushes in any kind of water or anything to keep them moist. And the first one, actually I'm not going to use this. One of the nice things about using paste paper is it's a great way to use up papers you don't like that much. So this is actually a paste paper from last week. I didn't show it to you. I made it off camera. And it's okay, but it's not one of my favorites. So I thought this would be fun to put something else on top. Now that might be really pretty. So let me use that. So we're gonna put this on top. And I'm not gonna be precious about this. Just put a quick layer on it. This container is 32 ounces. That cost me less than $8. And I used that one bucket for maybe 100 papers. So it was a lot. It goes a long way. I'm going to take this, I think this is a scalp massager. I got this at the Dollar Tree. It's a cheap store in the US. And what I'm going to do is use this as a mark maker. Now, because this is so cheap, it's also curved. So I need to push pretty hard on it, and we'll see how this works. So I'm just looking to reveal the marks, or the paper, I should say, underneath. This is very similar to gel plates in many ways. It's just this is not going to dry up really fast, and I can correct it. I can just paste right over this and I could just paint right over this and not have any effect. So I can play with this a long time. So I'm going to try doing a simple crosshatch with this one. And I love that color coming through. It's exactly what I was looking for. I wanted some high contrast. Now, by the way, the paper that I just covered up, I don't hate, but unless I love a paper, I don't stick with it. I cover it up, or I put another layer on it. Now, I think with this is a really cool thing, just to add a second layer of crosshatch, I should say. Now, the only downside of putting this on top of this other paper is there's a lot of texture on the other paper. So the texture is actually making my hand not do complete straight, which is fine. These are collage papers. I don't need to be perfect. So I think that is a nice start. Okay, that was number one. So number two, so one of the basics of doing these kinds of papers is you want to add water to the surface first. And by the way, this is a plastic mat. It's a Joggles plastic mat, which again I have linked in the show notes as well. And you put water on top. Now the one I just did for you, I didn't have water, and it didn't make really any difference that I could tell not having it, because it was already so thick. The purpose of putting the water on the bottom and the top is to get as many of the bubbles out as you can. Particularly when you don't already have a layer on it. So I'm going to add, I think I'm going to add this gorgeous dark blue. So, by the way, it's okay if I'm picking up some of the water. And it's also okay if I pick up some of the other paint that's on, because I'm going to keep, putting paint on the side here. It's okay to keep having paint on paint. All of these colors came from basically two colors, which is Phthalo Blue Green shade and Hansa Yellow Light. Therefore, if I mix up some of these colors off the side, it's fine because they're made from each other. So they will actually go together quite nicely. So I'm just trying to get a nice even coat on here. Now, if I had put a little more of that Phthalo Blue shade in here, I would have gotten a thicker coating right now. So I didn't put much of the paint in. So the amount of paint dictates how thick this is going to go down or not. So this is good enough, I think. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this really cool rolling pin. Love this as a mark maker. I've got a set of these, actually a lot of these. Let's hope for the best. Ah, yeah, it's working. And you just roll it down. In fact, this is not a very thick coat of this, which makes this work even better. I've put it on pretty thickly, and sometimes this doesn't work as well because the paint gets globbed up in that roller. If you go to Amazon or just Google decorative rolling pins, you'll get this. And I do have a link. I couldn't find this exact one though. So I've given you links to other ones that I thought were beautiful. I've had this one for quite some time, so I couldn't find it in my purchases. I think I actually used this for a Tune-In Tuesday on Instagram last year. Anyways, I just am in love with that. For a dark value paper that's really going to go beautifully with a lot of collages. Number 3, I'm going to take another old piece of, this is a piece of collage paper. In fact, this is actually from the balloon and baggie demo that I did several weeks ago. Again, I'm just going to add some water down. Now, because this already has paint on it, actually paste paper paint, no, it doesn't. This is actually regular acrylics. It's probably not going to lay down really flat, but that's okay. I'm just going through the motions because, I mean, it is laying down flatter. The flatter you get it, and the water flattens it out. It's just that the acrylic paint on top of this is repelling some of the water. So again, I'm going to spread this out a bit. Now, you know, this paper by itself is fine, but it really doesn't, you know, when I use collage papers, every single one of them, I want them to sing to me. I want them to go, oh my God, I love that. And that doesn't do it. So that's why I'm covering it up. So I want a contrasting color in something, now this isn't a huge contrast. I'm hoping this will work. But the reason I'm using this particular color, it may not be dark enough, we'll try it. Is this is pretty thin. You can see this is going on pretty thin. Because what I really want is to see the design underneath here. Because I think this is going to make it even more effective. So to get this consistency so thin, I just didn't put much paint in with the paste. So the less paint, the more thin it's going to come out. I already like that already. This is just basically a glaze at this point. Let's see if this works. And again, if it doesn't work, I can just paint right over this, just exactly what I'm doing right now. This is one of my mark makers from Kickstart. And I'm going to get a couple Q-tips. And I'm going to put this down. This is an old, is it a tape dispenser? I think this is like, was that blue tape that you use, painter's tape? And all I'm doing is I'm tracing around with the Q-tip. You know, with paste paper, what you're really doing is pulling paint up. So this is really kind of interesting because, I'm going to lay a second one down here. I want to see the paint underneath and see what kind of effect I have. I think this might be exactly what I'm going for. I'm trying to figure out how to interlock them so they're interesting and there'll be a pattern. So I will continue this though. So this is the same thing, but I used a very heavy paint. So the layer I put on top was not opaque. No, it was opaque, whereas this is very translucent. And I really want to be able to see the design underneath. And so I'm not gonna, I'll finish this off camera, but I'll do this a couple more. But I think this is just, it's really pretty, I think, when you have something underneath. And the paper underneath was okay, just not spectacular. So, I kind of like this. You know, once I get started doing, but particularly this particular design, I'm thinking, what other paper can I cover up and make better? So, I'll just put this aside for the moment. Number 4, we're going to take a piece of black paper. This is just black drawing paper. Fresh sponge here. Put this down. And again, I'm going to wet it on top. Now, by wetting it on top and bottom, you also help the paste paint adhere better as well. At least that's what they say. So, it seems to be true for me. I don't know what this is, but it's some kind of mark maker. Definitely not intended for what I'm doing it with, but it was one of my Kickstart mark makers. And so you can see all these wrinkles in here. The more wrinkles, the more likely it is that this, when I press this against it, it's not going to be as clean an impression. So I'm trying to get the bubbles out if I can. Kind of a medium value. I want it to pop against that black. So put a little more. All right. Actually, I really don't want any the black as much as I can. I don't want it to be showing. Okay. Now there's a little bit of bubble there, but that's fine. Now I'm just going to press, as a first layer, this is going to be 2-layered paper. I'm going to press this into the black. This is nice because it actually has handles so I can pick it up. Okay, that's nice. And I'm going to try to line these up. I'm not doing a perfect job lining up, but you know, it doesn't matter because this is a collage paper, which means I'm going to rip it up anyway. So I'm not going to use, usually I don't use the entire sheet when I'm making a collage. Oh, here's the finishing touch that I think is really quite beautiful. It's a similar technique that I did use a second ago. I'm going to put, this is just a plain bottle cap, pretty small. Again, I'm going to take Q-tip and trace around it. And I'm going to do that in interlocking circles all the way around. You know, the interesting thing to me about doing these paste papers is that they create these solid blocks of color which really quiet down a collage, which I often need quiet because, you know, the other papers that I've been making, particularly during the last 4 weeks prior to this, had more action going on. You know, the particularly the bubble, let's see, the bubble baggy papers and the dimensional papers, the stencil dimensional papers. Now this is getting very clogged with paint, so I'm just going to get a clean one because I'm not getting as much of the black off, and that's what I want. I want the black to show underneath. And I think kids would really love to do this too. I mean, I had so many people said they did the bubble paper with their kids. Like, wouldn't this be fun to do with kids? It's a little messy. You know, this mat gets messy. But I love that. And let me show you, this was one I did in just a lighter color. I think they're both beautiful. But I actually like the darker better because I really love the contrast between the dark and the light. Number 5, this is one of the papers I made last week. This is this was created by pressing 2 pieces of this paper together that had paint on it. You can see this in demo number 1 in the very beginning. Put some water on top, and again, it's going to resist going down all the way, but it's good enough. Okay, as many of those wrinkles out as I can. You don't have to. I mean, I still have bubbles in here. It's fine. So put a dark layer of paint against the dry. So this first one's dry. So I could have picked any of my old collage papers that I don't like as much, and this one I just don't like as much. I don't think it produced that much of an interesting pattern underneath. Oh, that's interesting. Some of the paint wasn't all mixed up. Now see, as I go through this, I'm finding bubbles, so I sort of can get them out by pulling this up and pressing them out. I'm trying to get a little bit thicker. And to get thicker, all I do is just lay more on. And I absolutely adore this color, particularly in a collage. I end up not having enough darker colors. I end up with a lot of mediums. And I want dark just to give me some contrast. Nice even surface going. Okay, good enough. So I'm just going to use, this is a credit card. I'm going to do some simple lines across and see what this, I do like that. Now here comes the real risky part. Do I mess with this? And my answer is yes, of course you do. So let's see if we can, I don't know if I want to do this or not, I don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, that's again, I'm creating this like puddles of paste that I really like because when it dries, this is all going to show. I just think that is a yummy piece of collage paper. So number 6, now the fact that I'm getting a whole bunch of paint all over this makes zero difference. It does make a difference, however, that I've got a ton of water on here because I don't really want to water the paint down. So I'm just gonna move over this and get some of that water up so it's not quite so liquidy. Try to squeegee it out a little bit. So just, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do stripes in these colors and put big contrasts next to each other. So I've got this dark blue, and let's put a really light color next to that. Got a baby blue. I'll just slightly overlap these. And then let's do this teal. So I'm trying to do contrast as I go. Light to dark, or light to medium. And you can see big bubbles in here that have formed. So I'm going to try to get those out. I don't know if I can. This apple green. That is, you know, the real cool thing about using only, basically it's just two colors, phthalo blue green shade and Hansa yellow light, is that I can overlap these colors and I'm just fine. Do a little bit different kind of blue. Yeah, we'll just finish it off with this. So I've got this lovely, I think this is a filbert. So this is interesting. What I'm going to do is make cross hatches in this. So I'm going to draw right across this. Now, I don't know if you see this, but those original two stripes are still there. You can see the stripes underneath because they've actually dyed what's under the paper underneath. Now I'm leaving a tiny bit of space. I don't need to. I've done it both ways, where I've left space, where I haven't left space. I'm just trying to be somewhat uniform. Now, if I were not on camera, I'd probably go a little slower than this, just so I'd be a little more uniform in my lines. But I'm kind of liking the way this is turning out, to tell you the truth. Now, the only thing I don't have, I think I'm just going to do, just to break this one up right here. There, I actually like that, surprisingly enough. And can you see this? I had the dark, all the colors underneath are still poking through, which I think is really quite stunning. I love that. Sorry, number 7 is a really fun one. I'm going to wet this down. And this is a garbage bag. So I'm going to try to get this garbage bag wet and get this as flat as possible. I'm going to put a dark layer, but let's do a little bit different dark layer. I'll do this one. I got a lot of water on the side here, so I'm going to try to avoid getting this in my paint because that'll make my paint thinner. I don't add any water when I'm adding paint to the paste paper. I just add the paint. And if I add a lot of paint to the paste, it doesn't make the paint thinner. Surprisingly, it actually makes the paint thicker. So the more paint I add, at least so far in my experiments, the more I get thicker paint. So meaning it won't, if I have less paint in here, oh, it's the opposite. Yeah, the more paint I have, the more opaque this will go down. So if I put more paint in here, it would actually go down more opaque than it is. You know, I think I'm going to add, I haven't done this ever before, I'm going to add a little variation because that blue just isn't making me happy. Just add a little blue just to pop it. I already like that so much better. And it also gives it some thickness, which this technique is really good for. If I have a little bit of depth to this. Okay, smooth this out. You know, I equate this to working on a dry erase board because I can just, you know, add all kind of mark making to it. Similar to a jelly pad, it's just, this is taking paint off of it. All right, so what I'm going to do, I've got this little catalyst wedge. I've got these in all different designs. And I am going to I think that's really beautiful. Here is another one I did, but you see it's a very light color and it's a slightly different pattern in how I did it. In fact, it pretty much turns out different every single time I do it. I love that. And it's a paper bag. And our very last one. Put this down. The fact that I'm turning my sheet glue makes no difference because we're going to cover it right back up. All right, just do a once over, see if I can get as many bubbles as possible out. So I am very focused at the moment, as I'm talking to you, on getting a nice variety of values in the papers I'm making because I want to use these for collage. And next week, I'm actually going to take the 5 papers that I've been making, this is one of them. I also have dendritic, I can't say that name right, the glass one, pressing glass between each other, and the balloons and baggy one, the cling wrap one, and the dimensional stencils. And I'm going to take those 5 types of paper and make a little series out of them and show you how I do that on the next Tune In Tuesday. So I'm going to take this credit card. Now this credit card, this is an old room key from my traveling days. I just took an X-Acto and cut it myself. So what I'm going to do is make some interesting marks in this. And by the way, I have to press this down pretty far because it's not going, it doesn't really want to lay down evenly. And very similar to one of the other papers, I'm just going to keep overlapping the paper. Question is, like, where do I want to start? Where do I want to end? I never know. I never know where to start here. I think I'll start right there. So far, this is a favorite time I've done this because it ends up, because you're just improvising here. So it ends up being a little different every time you do it. And then I want to do a little circle. So I'm thinking that's pretty cool. And I don't even want to mess it up, but I haven't done anything right there. So I'll just do a little one just to break it up. Okay, that's my favorite one so far. I mean, in terms of this design. So I did this 2 other times. This one I just went crazy. I mean, as a collage paper, this might actually be okay. I don't like the look of it right here. But I love the simplicity of this one. I think it's beautiful. Okay, that is number 8. And that's all she wrote. I will see you back here for another Tune In Tuesday, where I'm actually going to be making collages out of the last 5 weeks of collage papers, including this one. So have a blessed week, and I'll see you soon.